I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about the issues going on with kids and pollution and climate and health and equity, because that's where my world is right now. And frankly, it's where my world always is. I don't know how many people realize it, but the Environmental Protection Agency isn't actually so much about the environment as it is about public health. The EPA is a public health agency. That's our stock and trade. We protect the environment for sure because we need the planet to be healthy in order for people to be healthy. But we do it and our measure of success is whether or not we're going to save people's lives, whether our kids are going to stop having asthma attacks, whether people are going to stop getting cancer from exposure to pollution. And as we all know, pollution is not an equal opportunity killer. There's a reason why a lot of people in the African American community and a lot of people in the Latino community identify environment as a key issue for them. It's because they're the ones getting whacked by it. We have asthma in this country where we have at least 1 out of 10 kids on average with asthma. But it's 20% when you get to the Latino community, 20%. So we have issues here, and we need people for sure to vote, but we also need people to actually stop being so hopeless about whether or not we can fix these things when you do vote. We need people running for office that reflect our own values and that care more about doing things for us than they do getting themselves reelected. That's what people used to do when they served the public, and that's what we have to demand today. But I am going to sort of give you just this little history right now of the things that have brought the environmental movement to the table, but also identify some of the challenges we're facing today in Washington. But like it or not, I am going to leave you here hopeful. Like it or not, if you came here as a grumpy Gus, you are not leaving here as a grumpy Gus, because I don't want to see your face if that's what's going to happen. You know, part of the challenge I think we face today is we're so inundated with news that is mind-boggling that we sort of sit in a fetal position most of our lives saying, woe is me. I'm sick of it. I don't know about you. Every single morning I wake up with my husband, Ken, who we have been married for 39 years. I love him dearly. But if he wakes up one more morning watching MSNBC yelling about the tweeter storm last night, and that's all I hear about, I'm going to divorce him. And I've told him that, but I haven't said it as, as vehemently as I might say here. But I do tell him with all love and affection to shut up. Sit down, start the morning like normal human beings, have a cup of coffee. Let's talk about what's going on with our kids and our new grandson. Let's think about what's good in the world and stop letting the turkeys get us down. We're getting trampled by them. So we have to pull ourselves up. But what I really want to remind you of is just how much we have improved the environment over the past 60 or 70 years. If you're not as old as I am, you may not have experienced this. But things were miserable 60 or 70 years ago. We talk about the good old days, they were terrible. You had pollution everywhere. You drive down the street and you threw your rubbish out the window. You had, smokestacks spewing. When I was driving through Lowell and Lawrence, our biggest game when we were kids was to guess what color the river was going to be. Was it orange, red, blue? Because it would change colors every single time you went by it, depending upon what the textile industries were discharging there. And I swam in Boston Harbor, which is why most people think I'm a little deficient in many ways. I don't blame them, because you shouldn't have been swimming in Boston Harbor. But when you were with my family, that's where we went on summer vacation. This is what life was about. And you had smog days in Los Angeles, and we snicker about what's going on in Beijing, China. When that was Los Angeles, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, you name the city, that's what it looked like in those days. But it doesn't look like that anymore. It doesn't look like that anymore because we had the best president in the world who actually started up the Environmental Protection Agency. The best president. Richard Nixon. It's the only thing you can give the man a hand for. The rest of it, it's a slap across the, So this is, and he started this, and I honestly believe that I have worked in government for all of my life, but I really only now feel that it has become such a partisan issue that I'm not sure how we move forward. I have worked for 6 governors. 5 of them were Republicans. I'm a flaming liberal. I loved my work. I spared nobody with the plain truth about what was going on and what we needed to do to protect public health. And we made progress under each and every governor. It did not matter whether you were a Republican or a Democrat. The Republicans weren't sitting aside going, well, I don't care if my kids have really clean air. What difference does that make? Or if the communities of voters didn't have clean water to drink, that would be a problem for them. So they understood the fundamental need for government intervention, that it wasn't about trampling on anyone's rights. It was our responsibility to protect our kids and their future. It was our responsibility as a government to ensure that in the United States of America, which is a democracy of, by, and for the people, that every person had a right to clean air and clean water and safe places to live and for their kids to play and safe schools for them to go to. That is their right under the Constitution. And so when we regulate, we don't take away people's rights. We give them an ability to live healthy and happy lives, which the Constitution tells us we have a right to do in this country. And Republicans understood that. They knew that they had to do this. They have pollution slamming them in the face. Now, though, things are a little bit different. Things are different in 2 different ways. One is, I think that it's very hard to explain to people what pollution looks like today unless you are actually in those communities that have been left behind. And we all know they exist. They're called environmental justice communities. They're the communities that live right on the outskirts and the fence lines of industry, where you can continue to see the problems visible and you can smell them and you can taste them. Those communities get it, but the rest of us live here. The rest of us live in places where we have difficulty getting people all revved up about the environment until something happens to them, until something happens to their water system. But isn't that really kind of human nature? Aren't human beings sort of human? This is what we do. Until something is slamming us in the face, we virtually ignore it. And the challenge with climate change has always been that when we first figured out what was going on with climate change, that it posed such a big problem that we all ran around sort of like little henny pennies, the sky is falling. Only the sky's not falling, just gathering a lot of carbon in it. And then you went on from there for an hour and a half to explain how that actually has any meaning for people's lives. And then you ended up by trying to scare the hell out of them so that they would do something about it. And then we put up a poster of a polar bear to explain why we should all really, really care about this issue. We should turn around the absolute ways in which every human being on the face of the earth has ever generated energy and change that. And would you mind doing it in the course of about 10 or 15 years? Really good messaging, sound communication strategy. That's when things started to get really difficult. And we haven't changed that messaging, regardless of the fact that, yes, people now know that climate change is real. They know it because they can feel it. They can see it by the devastation that we're seeing with the exacerbated storms. But climate change still remains an issue where if you scare people, they are going to either deny it or stand still and do nothing. That is human nature. That's how people respond to being afraid. My issue is, why aren't we running towards a low-carbon future? Why aren't we showing a future that is healthier, that is more stable, that is more equitable? Why aren't we searching out clean energy solutions, never mind whether we have to do it? I should never have to argue with anybody about whether clean energy is the right choice. And frankly, as much as this administration is trying to change the world by rolling back everything that the Obama administration not only ever did, but ever contemplated, right? And they're trying to do it in shortcuts, I will tell you they are not going to succeed. They're not going to succeed for two reasons. One is they're lousy at it, and number two is we were really good at it. We followed the law, we followed the science, we did a public process that would knock your socks off. We learned what we needed to do. We set a reasonable path forward for the country to continue to march. We actually followed the energy generation, which you and others helped to spur in states and regions across the country. And that is all working beautifully, and coal is no longer the fuel of choice. We know that, and that is not going to happen even if somebody in the White House stamps their feet or clicks their heels 3 times and says, I want to go home to coal. You ain't going there, baby. The train's left and the balloon ain't taking off. This is what's happening. And you can only look at what's going on in D.C. now and see that there is a desperation on the part of folks trying to roll things back. Because they're desperate, because every time they've done something, it's the courts have thrown it back and told them things like, you're making a mockery of the statute, the rule's fine, you got to implement it and do it tomorrow. They don't like those answers. So instead of that, now they're thinking about continuing to plod forward with all of these proposals to rescind everything. But the challenge now they face is they realize they can't really do it on the facts. So now they're trying to change the rules of the road. Now they're trying to eliminate the best science so that EPA can no longer consider it. Or they're trying to change the science advisors at EPA so that they're from ExxonMobil and Koch brothers and Chevron, which is actually where their recommended members of the Science Advisory Board have just last worked, okay, or are working there now. This is what's happening. And they're trying to say that we don't need to worry about that pesky cost-benefit analysis. We're going to change the rules of the road there too. And instead of looking at all of the health benefits of the rules, we're only going to look at the direct benefits when it's convenient for us, and we're never going to look at the indirect benefits. Which means that you're going to have rules that they propose that now don't need to say we did anything wrong. They just need to say the rules have changed. This one has no more benefits anymore because I'm not going to count all the kids that have better breathing because particulate matter goes down, and instead I'm just going to count IQ points that are reduced because of mercury, and I am not going to count all of I'm going to count all the costs associated with this, that, and the other, so that the rules lose for other reasons. But I'm going to tell you that's not going to work either. That's not going to work because the courts are not stupid. They are not going to tolerate it. And the Republicans in the background, even in Washington, D.C., are beginning to squirm in their seats. Because they know that if people look under the hood there, they'll see that the people they're damaging are not the Democratic Party or the Democrats. It's their own children. It's their own children's future. That's why we have to focus on kids. We have to stop pointing at polar bears and start pointing at our own kids. Because that's what climate change and that's what carbon pollution and that's what pollution is all about. Because it's kids that always are on the front line of the victims of pollution. Why? Because they're different than the rest of us. They have a different metabolism. They're growing at a faster rate than everyone else. They have immature systems that can be damaged and permanently damaged by exposure to pollution. And we need to speak clearly and with as strong a voice as we can that we are not going to go backwards to the 60s and pretend that that is actually the future of how to make this country great. That is ridiculous, and we have to fight it with every breath that we take, and we have to give our children a future. That is not just a scientific choice or a political choice. It is a moral responsibility. That's why you're sitting here. That's why I do what I do and why I speak up for the children. But let me tell you what's hopeful. Let me tell you why I'm excited. Because I am getting hammered in Washington, D.C. Everything I did for 8 years, working 24 hours of the day, maybe that's a slight exaggeration, but not much. Everything I did is now up for grabs, and I get up in the morning with a smile on my face. I do it for 2 reasons. One is I'm a terrible loser. I won't lose. They are not getting me down. They're not taking my life away. And number 2, I think we have a lot of reason to be hopeful. And I want people to see it. Not just hopeful that we did the right thing, but hopeful that this administration, in the silliness that they're bringing into government today, in the serious ways in which that is undermining the core values of what brought us in this country together, I just don't think that that is going to last. I see nibbles of democracy leaking out all over the place. Now, when is the last time that you people marched? Before this president. You can't remember, right? That is very good. And it was really fun. We had tie-dyed shirts and bell-bottoms. Pull them out. Get them out of your closet. Try them on. I did. It's not a pretty sight. Nevertheless, you can buy them in a store, so to some funky place. People are marching again. They're even getting scientists to march. My favorite science poster was, "Things must be desperate when geeks have to demonstrate." And now that I'm at Harvard, I fully agree with that statement. You know, we are seeing that, and we're seeing kids like the kids at the Parkland School who did something that you just have to remember just how remarkable this is. I met Governor Scott. He is not a person that would ever, in my mind, ever have signed a gun control measure. And he did, because children demanded it. Isn't it our time to stand up for children? Isn't it our time to not make them be the ones in the spotlight, but for us to stand up and vote for people who share our core values? Isn't it about time that we talked about our kids? Isn't it about time that instead of climate change being part of some partisan debate, which I really don't understand, and instead gets into our dinner table as a conversation that is not similar to your Uncle Frank who really likes farm animals? That's not what climate change is. You can talk about it at the dinner table. You should bring it up on Thanksgiving, even though Uncle Harry may not like it or agree with it. Let's just talk about it. Why has it become some weird kind of conversation? Take it back. Bring it to your dinner table. Bring it to Main Street. Bring it to Wall Street. Because one of the things we need to do is to make sure that our investments are going to the places we want and not to the sources of energy that now are killing our planet and destroying the future for our children. That's what we have to do. That's what we can do. And I believe that people are changing. You know, I do not hear a lot of people in my world, and maybe that's because they'll know I'm going to punch them in the face if they say it. No, I'm just kidding. But people don't come to me and say, oh, climate change isn't happening. They just may not want to have that conversation because it's so clear that it is. And so everybody goes, oh, what do I do? And just get over this and let's talk about what we really need to do moving forward. Let's stop making this a partisan issue. Let's talk about our kids. You know, I am at Harvard because the young people today understand that climate change is real. Okay, repeat after me. Climate change is real. Climate change is the result of man-made emissions. That's why we need women to rule the world. That's what I get them to say. And they are really buying into this, ladies and gentlemen. You are going to get new candidates out there. But they don't even understand why there is any question about this. How could anyone still question about climate change? Why would anyone want to? Because honestly, pollution is impacting our kids tremendously. Pollution is impacting the minority communities, the African American communities, the Latino communities, low-income communities, communities of color. They are getting hammered by pollution. This is nothing but carbon pollution. Let's stop talking about it as climate change. That's too long a sentence. It's just another thing, a pollutant, that we can get rid of if we put our minds to it, just like the pollution from the 60s and 70s. So let's stop being hopeless. Let's realize that a change like this is a long, drawn-out affair. The sooner we get together to recognize it and to stop worrying about, arguing about it, and instead run to a clean energy future, the faster we're going to get there and the safer our kids are going to be. Yes, it's Children's Health Month because our kids are vulnerable. They're not just vulnerable to pollution, they're vulnerable to us sitting on our butts, moaning and whining. So stop doing it. Don't act like we're losing because we're actually winning. Because of your early efforts to push energy efficiency and clean energy, we now are moving farther and faster than we ever thought possible. So we just need to send the right signals to the investors of today, to the innovators of tomorrow, that in the United States we care about our kids, we care about their future, and we are going to demand the technologies that are going to get us where we need to go. And we're going to tell the rest of the world that we are part of the entire world order, and we are going to do what we're supposed to do, not just for ourselves, but recognizing the connectedness of the world that we live in and our responsibility to them as well. And we are going to tell them that we will win, we will take care of this problem, we will do what we have to do, and we will keep our children safe. That's what you need to tell them. That's what you need to say to yourself when you wake up in the morning. And if you don't, I'm going to find you and I'm going to track you down. Thank you very much. All right. Now I left plenty of time for questions.
How about the Children's Trust? Where do we go there?
That's a very good question. You mean the stuff that's going on right now? I just had a conversation with some of the lawyers this morning.
Right.
Yeah, they still seem pretty positive. And this is the lawsuit that about a dozen kids are suing the federal government about the responsibility to actually protect the planet and for their future. Say it again?
And their failure to do so.
That's right. And so they're looking for a plan to actually address this challenge. And there's a little bit of a snafu with the Supreme Court. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But they still seem pretty confident. And the reason why I was talking to them is I'm at Harvard at this place called the Center for Climate Health and the Global Environment. I keep dropping everything. That's okay, though. And one of the things that we do is try to be helpful to communicate the health issues associated with climate, because it just grounds it. It makes it personal. It makes people understand that it's not about somebody else's problem, and it's really not about the planet. The planet is perfectly happy to not have people living on it. We probably confuse it. You know, so, but we would prefer to be able to live here, which is what the problem is. And so one of the things, I was in London a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about this with some folks that are following it, and they wanted me to call because really those kids have great stories to tell. They're an opportunity for us to explain the real broad ramifications from a health perspective of climate change. You know, right now, carbon pollution and regular traditional pollutants kill at least 9 million. And most of that damage, 9 million people every year. And most of those people are from low and middle income countries, and the vast majority are kids. It's women and children on the front line of these issues. And we need to get that message out. We need to have people understand that health and climate are intimately entwined with one another, and that a healthy future demands that we take care of climate. And when we do, it's a tremendous opportunity to actually look at ways in which we can take actions that drive health benefits today on our way to a healthier planet. That is something the developed world wants to invest in, and we need them at the table.
Please share some of your hope about China and where you're going with the carbon.
Well, you know, China's an interesting case, and it's one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing. I was the assistant administrator at EPA, and I oversaw the air program before I was the administrator. And one of the really fun things that we did was we put a air monitor on the embassy in Beijing. And we did it, you know, with very innocently, sort of. We did it because the embassy staff wanted to know how bad the particulate matter levels were, and so that they can decide whether to send their kids to school, should they go out and play. And everybody knew that, hi Nancy, everybody knew that the monitoring system in Beijing was not really as accurate as one would want it. I'm being very kind here. And so in the course of putting that up and spreading the word, they were tweeting the results to the embassy staff, and those results got out to the public. Shock and bewilderment. How that happened, I will never know or tell. But I actually happened to be in Beijing doing some events a week after that happened, a week to 2 weeks. And it created a huge furor when people realized that they were being deprived of information that was critical to them. And even in China, in a totalitarian government, that mattered. They called it a social issue, which meant they knew that they would get messed up and have problems if that many people got really mad at them, which they did. And so I ended up getting a visit from lots of the people in the government when I was there, and they told me I needed to take that air monitor down. I said, not really, because the embassy is U.S. territory, but thank you for your input. And so we talked for a while, and I ended up talking to not just the environmental agency there, but I ended up talking to their development agency, the NDRC, and I made the pitch to them, look, you are not going to get away with this air pollution stuff. People now know, and they know that their health is at risk, and we can probably quantify how many kids are dying as a result of that risk. We can even tell you what sources are actually causing that problem for you. And I knew that their immediate thought would be to move all the industries outside of the area so that they were polluting somewhere else, and then Beijing would be okay. And so we were talking about it, and I told them that's not going to work because mostly it's your traffic, and they were like, oh damn, what are we going to do now? And so one of the sort of discussions that prompted after that was, how do we take care of the air pollution problem and focus on the greenhouse gas reductions that result from that, and make China a leader in that effort instead of a laggard. They really did it for the pollution, but it started them down the road to actually feel much better about playing a leadership role in terms of climate change. Now, are they doing everything we would want them to do? No. Are they fully invested in this? Yeah, they are. And there's a lot of communication, a lot of reopening of old lines of communication that have happened. And I feel pretty confident that the challenge that we face now is that China is getting quite good at developing technologies that are now coming here instead of us developing those technologies because all the right signals aren't being sent. We should be basically benefiting from the economic advantages of these new technologies. And instead, if we continue to have our head in the sand, we will lose those jobs and that economic benefit. One of the things that you really need to talk about, and this is something that I know only because I've been really intimately involved in these things for a long time, is that people are really worried because this administration in DC is not engaging on climate change and other pollution issues. And I get that. It's very frustrating to me. But what they don't recognize is that the federal government did absolutely nothing on climate change and took no action on pollution that hadn't been demanded of it. It basically, every good idea on how to protect our families and our communities from pollution has come from the grassroots level and worked its way up. That's where change happens first. And it's only when communities get so empowered and aggravating to state leaders, then they do something. And then the states get so aggravated, aggravating to the regions, and regions act, or the federal government acts, and they do exactly the same thing and claim it's innovative that the grassroots level was working on for a long time. So I think we focus way too much on what others aren't doing and way too little on what our power is. And we have to go back to that. You have to sit down and say you're going to build a coalition, and anybody that's not listening to you, you're going to vote them out of office. That's what you're going to do. Seriously. And I think maybe this is why I'm kind of hopeful, is I actually think we can do this stuff. And I think with every yin, there's a yang, and I'm waiting on that yang. All right. Well, listen, everybody, I know you've had a long night. Thank you so much for inviting me here. Thank you for everything you've done, and thank you for stepping up for everything that we all stand for, and I appreciate it very much. Take care now.